The President. Members will please remain standing for the Chief Executive. The Chief Executive. The Chief Executive will first address the Council. The Chief Executive. Madam President, honorable members, at the 9th session of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress held on the 26th of April, a decision was made on the election methods for the 2007 Chief Executive election and the 2008 Legislative Council election of the Special Administrative Region of Hong Kong. According to this decision, the election of the third Chief Executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region to be held in the year 2007 shall not be by means of universal suffrage. The election of the Legislative Council of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region in fourth term in the year 2008 shall not be by means of an election of all the members by universal suffrage. The ratio between members returned by functional constituencies and members returned by geographical constituencies through direct elections who shall respectively occupy half the seats is to remain unchanged. The procedures for voting on bills and motions in the Legislative Council are to remain unchanged. And as for the 2007-2008 election, appropriate amendments could be made in accordance with the relevant provision of basic law and the principle of gradual and orderly progress. The Standing Committee of the NPC has exercised its power to make the above decision in the light of the actual situation in Hong Kong. Secretary General Wu Bangguo specifically pointed out that this decision was made with the NPCSC having fully heard the views of different parties. The decision was made as a move to show the high degree of responsibility of the central authorities to Hong Kong, and is also to safeguard the interests of the Hong Kong people. And the decision is also to safeguard the provisions, the democratic system in accordance with the provisions of the basic law. The SAR government welcomes the decision of the NPCSC. This decision has formally initiated the amendment process as spelled out in the annexes of the basic law. It is also the new basis for the constitutional development of Hong Kong. And in accordance with the decision of the NPCSC, the SAR government will take forward the next step of the constitutional development exercise. I understand there are certain parties and individuals in the community who are disappointed about this decision. I hope they will have regard to the interests of Hong Kong and the country as a whole and adopt a rational attitude in looking at this decision. After the interpretation and the decision of the NPCSC, I think we are fully aware that in the context of the 07 to 08 constitutional development of Hong Kong and beyond, it has the power and the responsibility. Constitutional development is an important evolution for Hong Kong, and we must have the consent of the central authorities before we could initiate any changes. I'm sure we also realize that the economy between Hong Kong and the mainland is interrelated. It is important that we maintain good relations with the central authorities, because it's only by doing so that we are able to have concrete guarantee for the social stability, economic prosperity and development, and constitutional development for Hong Kong. In fact, for a long time, the central authorities have shown selfless support to Hong Kong. Since the reunification, we can all see that the central authorities have always strictly abided by the basic law. It has insisted on the implementation of one country, two systems. It always has the fundamental interests of the people of Hong Kong in mind in handling every issue. It's all because they want Hong Kong to become even better, and that includes the decision made by the NPCSC this time. In fact, starting from last year, the third quarter of last year, the economy in Hong Kong has begun to recover, and we are gaining momentum in that respect. This year, we expect to have a 6% growth, and so the economic development is indeed encouraging. That's because on the one hand, this ASEAN government has adopted a strategy to take advantage of the developments on the mainland, and also we've had received staunch support from the Central People's Government, which launched a series of measures to stimulate our economy. And then in the financial sector, the logistics sector, commerce and trade, and also tourism, Hong Kong has unique edge in the whole of the Asia-Pacific region. This has helped spur the development of our economy. So we must seize upon this opportunity offered to Hong Kong in the next 20 years when the country continues to develop. We must remain focused on this unique opportunity, and we need new thinking. We need to find new economic growth point and identify new potential industries. To do this job well, we rely on the entire government, not just individual departments. We need the entire community, not just individual industries, to all be focused and work together so that we could create the momentum and we could create the right environment and maintain the momentum of our development. I'm sure the people of Hong Kong are most concerned about our economic development, employment, and people's livelihood. So to really do a good job in stimulating our economy is the biggest expectation of the public of us. Members, the Basic Law has laid down that the ultimate goal for the constitutional development of Hong Kong is universal suffrage, and this is a consensus between the Central People's Government and the people of Hong Kong. And this is a goal we all work towards together. So what's before us is just a matter of pace, whether we move faster or we move at a steadier pace. The NPCSC has made a decision on the 2007 and 2008 election methods for the Chief Executive and the Legislative Council, so we must now adopt a pragmatic and positive attitude. We must follow the guidelines of the NPC decision and start a new round of work on the constitutional development. To get to the KSAR government and members, we could work together. And on this starting point, we could move towards making amendments to the 2007 and 2008 election methods, and then we could take a steady pace to move towards our ultimate goal. Thank you. Well, members who wish to... The Chief Executive will now answer questions raised by members. In view of the immense public concern over the issues relating to constitutional development and economy in the past few years, the Chief Executive has suggested that members focus their questions on these two topics. A member whose question has been answered may, if necessary, and for the purpose of elucidation only, ask a short follow-up question. Mr. Andrew Wong, please. Madam President, Mr. Tong. Now, it's said that if you listen to views selectively, you could never be wise. Now, I'm glad to read from newspaper that Mr. Zhang Qinghong would be willing to meet with the Democratic camps and all other parties in Hong Kong. Now, you serve as the bridge between the Hong Kong people and the Central. I think you should convey the public's views to the Central. So my question for Mr. Tong is, in the past month, 1 month, how many Hong Kong organizations or individuals have you met and to listen to the views on the interpretation and the NPCSC decision, and what measures could you adopt to make sure you don't have selective listening? Now, constitutional development is a major issue for the country and for Hong Kong, and I do listen to many different views. As the Chief Executive, as the three-member task force, we have our responsibility in the task of constitutional development, and the central authorities also have their powers and their responsibility, and we're all working together. So I'm afraid I can't tell you right here and now how many people I have met and how long I spent with them, but I can tell you I have met many people. Mr. Rong? Could we ask the Chief Executive for a written reply, that is in the past month, who you have met, you know, the individuals and the organizations, and in what occasions have you talked about the question of constitutional development? Well, I think I would be happy to schedule a meeting with you in my office to talk about this. Mr. Ambrose Lau? The credit rating agency Standard & Poor's confirmed yesterday they will maintain a negative rating for Hong Kong, that is for the Hong Kong dollar. That's because they believe the current political climate might tie the government's hands in rolling out measures to generate more revenue and cut expenditure. So, and that might impact on the target for the elimination of the fiscal deficit. So, what measures could be adopted to reflect the latest position to these credit rating agencies, so that their concerns could be allayed and their confidence in Hong Kong could be boosted? Yes, I think the Standard & Poor's rating thus sound an alarm to tell us that, to remind us that we have to handle issues carefully. I think there are many things we can do. To start with, we must insist on our principle of prudent financial management. And secondly, for our target to eliminate the fiscal deficit, we must impress upon people that we will be able to achieve that target eventually. I think, but what is most important is that for people with different views, especially because of this political development issue that sparked off many different, I think it's very important for us to all sit down together to have rational and calm communication, so that hopefully we can eventually reach a consensus. So these are all things we need to do together. And I understand the Financial Secretary will keep in close contact with Standard & Poor and explain to them what is happening here. It's hoped that their concerns can be allayed. So we're working on many fronts on this issue.
Mr. Ma, Mr. Tong, may I refer to the second report of the task force, your report to the NPCSC. Now, 9 factors are contained in these 2 reports. I agree to these factors in principle. Now, in fact, we have to look at the relationship between the SAR and the central authorities, the operation of the accountability system, the role of party politics, the nurturing of political talents, the research in public policies, and so on and so forth. So all these have to be considered before governance can be enhanced. And according to the administration, the conditions in these areas are not ripe yet. But then, what has the SAR government done to facilitate the maturing of these factors? For example, a couple of years ago, we said that there should be more work done on policy research, and there should be more think tanks in the community. And I would like to know what the SAR government has done since the reunification in this regard, and what is the government going to do in future to bring about a more mature development in these areas? And what do you think, or by what criteria will you decide whether these conditions are ripe or not? Now, recently, there has been a review on the political structure, and these issues have been widely discussed. Now, the central authorities have raised 6 issues of principle. The task force listened to the views of different sectors in the community. The task force communicated with the central authorities and listened to the views of the central authorities, and the task force came up with the 9 factors. These are very important factors. If there can be a consensus on these factors, that will be conducive to the development of the political structure. So concerning the 6 principles and the 9 factors, they are important to the governance of Hong Kong. And what is more, they are important to the development of democracy. They are critical in our move towards the ultimate goal of universal suffrage. And so, in the days to come, we really must work very hard in those areas. Mr. Ma. Madam President, I hope that Mr. Tong can tell us clearly whether something has been done in the past, and more importantly, what will be done to facilitate development in these areas. Now, if I am to go through the item one by one, then I have to go into a lot of details. But let me set one example. In my policy address, I said that we had to have people-based governance. And what is important is that we have to collect public opinion. We have to incorporate different sectors, different people into the political structure, and we have to incorporate people from different sectors into our advisory committees. We have to have experts to give us assistance in the formulation of policies. So these are being done. And these things, of course, will be conducive to our development of the 9 factors. We'll be able to nurture talents through these measures. Mr. Albert Ho, Madam President, Mr. Tong, from the end of March this year to the 25th of April this year, within a month's time or less than a month's time, the NPCSC, under very meticulous planning, completed an interpretation of the basic law, and then a mechanism was set up, and the mechanism was invoked upon to rule out universal suffrage for the 2 direct elections or the 2 elections. And in fact, the NPCSC ruled that the status quo would be maintained, and in fact there would not be any orderly and gradual progress. So it was a self-directed show by the NPCSC. Concerning Hong Kong, the CE and the task force, I think you were like tools in the show. You were not even supporting actors in the show. And in fact, the Hong Kong people, it seems that they were fooled by the central authorities and the NPCSC. We weren't allowed even to discuss the options. We were denied the opportunity to discuss whether there should be universal suffrage. So concerning the objective of universal suffrage for 07 and 08, I understand this is a controversial issue, but I think you should have at least have done one thing. You should have asked the NPCSC to allow Hong Kong people to put forward different options for political development, and they should consider these options before they come to a decision. But then all along, it seems that you were only supporting actors, or not even supporting actors. Mr. Ho, I hope that you will understand this. I and the 3-member task force have faithfully reflected the views of the people of Hong Kong. These are our responsibilities. We have discharged our responsibilities. And secondly, I hope that you will understand this. On the 6th of April, the NPCSC gave an interpretation of the basic law. And on the 26th of April, the NPCSC made a decision. Those were in accordance with the responsibilities of the NPCSC. We have to accept this fact. The NPCSC has made a decision. And in fact, I have referred to the explanation given by Mr. Wu Bangguo, Secretary General of the NPCSC. The NPCSC has listened to the views of different parties. The decision was made for the long-term good of Hong Kong. The decision was made for the benefit of the long-term development of Hong Kong. It was a decision made after public views had been taken into account. The CE and the task force know their responsibilities. We have to reflect the views of Hong Kong people to the NPCSC. We know that we have to discharge our duties. If you are suggesting that we have let Hong Kong people down, we have betrayed the interests of Hong Kong people, then I have to tell you that we and the SAR government have to uphold the long-term interests of Hong Kong. Now, maybe you and I have different views and different perspectives. We have to uphold the interests of Hong Kong. We have to uphold the interests of the country. I think we have done the right thing. Mr. Ho. Concerning political development, the central authorities have the final say. We're not disputing this point. But then in Hong Kong, I think we should be given the liberty and the dignity to air our views before a decision was made by the NPCSC. We should have been given the chance to put forward options and to discuss the various options. And I think the SAR government was duty-bound to uphold our interests in this respect. But have you done that? Now, Mr. Tong, it seemed that you did not want to meet the media. You did not want to answer sensitive questions from the media. You shunned the media. Or you just repeated remarks that had been made by the central authorities. Now, maybe there's a lot of pressure upon you. But then Mr. Zhang Hin-chi, NPCSC member, said that before the report was submitted to the NPCSC, there had been prior discussions between you and the central authorities. And we wanted to meet you, but you said you didn't have the time. So is it that you are working for the people of Hong Kong, or is it that you are merely working for the central authorities, or is it that you only want to make sure that candidates who support you will win in the elections?
The task force, before completing the second report, has heard views from the people of Hong Kong, and it has been in communication with the central authorities, and that we have made public before. That's the first point. Second point, I do recall on that day I received your letter asking to meet with me. I made an arrangement at the first instance. I was keen to meet you, but I'm stressed also a point here. You know, as for my writing to the NPCSC in Beijing, that's a separate issue, because you know the letter that I sent to them served only one purpose. That is, in accordance with the your interpretation on the 6th of April, we believe we are now able to initiate the constitutional review. Now, we needed to have the consent of the NPCSC before we could do it. So that's what I did with that letter. And in your letter, you asked that if the NPCSC gave consent, then that's something we should do. So these are two separate issues. Mr. Mlangsing. Thank you, Madam President. I agree, after the reunification, we have more dignity and more liberty to express our views. Now, if I could add, Mr. Chong, the Madam President and some other members, altogether 6 of them, were returned to this council by an election committee. And in this committee is comprised of and many members, ex-officio members or directly elected members from different sectors. Now, in the constitutional review exercise, now we have a selection committee of 800 members, which has a statutory status. It's representative. Now, how can you allow them to play a more active role in this constitutional review process? Now, for these 800 members, yes, they could play a fuller role in many different aspects, including in the review of the political structure. I think the best way for us to do it is for me and my colleagues to talk to them more. We'll do that. Thank you, Mr. Moon. Well, thank you for that response. But I think for the 800 members, or you need to talk to them, but I think what is more important is to lay down a specific timetable, because you know, these people, they are elected from different sectors, they have their own commitments, they're all very busy. So could you be more specific? Perhaps then later on you could let the committee members know as to when they will meet with you. Well, that's the next step of our work. Mr. Tommy Zhang. Mr. Tong, in the policy address this year, you undertook to allow the middle class more participation in politics. and you will appoint more people from the middle class to various statutory bodies. But as far as last month, it seems that we're told everything is still under consideration. It seems things are moving rather slowly. So, Mr. Tung, can you tell us what is your specific target, or how can you speed up the process so that you could deliver your pledge as soon as possible? Oh yes, I'm not happy with this slow progress. Yes, we need to speed things up. We will most definitely expedite things. Mr. Tommy Chung, well, by expediting, do you have a timetable? Is it in terms of years or months? Definitely, in terms of months. Ms. Choi So-yuk. Madam President, my question for Mr. Tung is this. You know, the listing rules in Hong Kong now do not require companies to announce their corporate and social responsibility when they, apply for listing or after they're listed. So they don't require to submit the corporate social responsibility report. So do you think it is we're indulging these corporations, and would it not affect the international financial position of Hong Kong? And maybe it's also unfair to minority shareholders because they don't know that they might have to show the unknown environmental responsibilities and fees and charges when they buy shares of these companies. So are you aware of that? Now, at the end of last year, there were more than 1,000 listed companies in Hong Kong, an increase of over 50% compared to before the reunification 6 years ago. So that's very good progress. And this year, another 85 companies will be listed. So as far as Hong Kong's position as Asia's financial center is concerned, I think our position is solid. Another point, whether it's a listed company or not, my own experience is if a company has shown a high degree of responsibility to the community, it participates actively in community affairs, then that company would have the recognition of its customers and its staff, and that is a good company. And if a company shows great responsibility towards the environment, this company will have the support of its customers and its staff. So when you want to judge if a company is good or not, you just need only to look at these two aspects, and you can tell if it's a good company or not. And you say, well, but then that's self-discipline. Maybe not enough. And as far as corporate governance is concerned, now, does the SFC need to do something there? I think we should leave that to the industry and the SFC to deal with. Ms. Troy? For major international financial centers around the world, they do have this requirement for listed companies. So, Mr. Tung, do you not think that if the government makes such requirements, it would actually help to consolidate Hong Kong's position as a financial center? Well, if anything would benefit the consolidation of our position as an international financial center, we'll certainly do it. I think I will pass on your views to the SFC for further consideration. Ms. Lee Feng-ying. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On May 1st, Labor Day, you said you were very concerned about the long working hours and low pay of cleansing workers under outsourced contract. You said you were very concerned about their rights and interests. Now, but I'm concerned the government will only pay lip service while it's toothless to do anything. So can you tell us what concrete measures you'll take to protect their interests and rights, and do you have a specific timetable? Ms. Lee, I've expected this question from you today. Now, I don't want the embarrassment, that was in relation to Mr. Cheung's question. I can tell you we will start doing this on the 6th of May. A guideline has been issued. We will resolutely implement this guideline.
Ms. Lee. So, Mr. Tong is saying that the work will start today. But then what measures will be adopted? Will there be legislation, for example, to make sure that the workers will get a reasonable level of wages? And will there be a statutory limit concerning a number of working hours? Now, we have issued guidelines to the relevant government departments. Now, for contractors of outsourced work, they all have to accept one condition, and that is, say for non-technical or non-skilled workers, say cleansing workers, the median wage has to be specified. And concerning working hours, the number or the median number has to be specified as well. And we have issued guidelines to all relevant departments, and they have to enforce the guidelines when there are new contracts. Dr. Law Chee-hwa. Thank you, Madam President. I would like to ask a question about health and welfare matters. Now, as you may recall, Mr. Tong, there is this urban quadrilapic who has asked the CE and electrical members to look at the issue of euthanasia. Now, I'm not asking you to comment on this issue today, Mr. Tong, but then concerning people like Ban, I think our medical and welfare services are not adequate to make them feel that there is still a meaning to continue living. And can you try to help people like Ban so that they will know that there will still be quality of living and that they should continue to live? Dr. Law, in fact, I have a lot of sympathy for Ban. And I think the entire community should do more for people like him. Now, on euthanasia, of course, I have my personal views. This is a controversial issue. I can only say that the relevant departments are doing their work, but of course there is always room for improvement in respect of resources, in respect of manpower. Of course, we must always do more for these people. Dr. Law. Madam President, in fact, I hope that Mr. Tong can tell me what the government's objectives are. We can always do more, that is true. But then, should there be a benchmark, for example, to make these people feel that there's meaning in continuing living? Imagine their position. They can't communicate with the rest of the world. They are paralyzed. So do you think they can still find meaning in life? So what is the policy position of the government? Dr. Law, if you want to look at the basic policy objectives, then you have to deal with the issue or the policy issue of euthanasia. And this is, in fact, a worthy topic for discussion. I think we should see how we can give further assistance to Ban and people like him so that they can regain their confidence in life. Mrs. Sophie Leung. Madam President, Mr. Tong, regional cooperation is becoming more and more important. Now we're told that we are in Hong Kong, but we have to rely on the support of the mainland, and we also have to be aware of opportunities in the world. And Hong Kong is in the Pearl River Delta. What should Hong Kong's positioning be? What should Hong Kong's role be? And what should our role be? And what should our attitude be in this whole process of integration? I believe you are referring to the Greater Pearl River Delta region. Yes, Mr. Tong. In March this year, when the NPC was in session, I had dinner with Mr. Zhang Dejiang and we had extensive discussion, preliminary discussions and extensive discussions on the concepts of integration. Now, I think we're talking about 9+2. We have, of course, the 9 provinces led by Guangdong and other 8 provinces, and then we have Macau and Hong Kong, and other provinces, of course, include Yunnan and Sichuan. And we're talking about a population of 350 million. This is an extremely big market with immense potential. I think it's going to be the global trend to strive for regional economic cooperation. For example, there is the Changjiang River Delta, and now we have the Greater Pearl River Delta. And concerning professional services, logistics, investment, opportunities, I think Hong Kong is faced with many opportunities. We have to actively play a part in this process. We should proactively take part in the exercise. And so concerning this Pan-Pearl River Delta development, and that's going to be the next step. And I'm sure that Mr. Donald Tsang will be following up very closely on this issue. We are still in the planning process, and that's why no formal announcements have been made yet. But I can tell you that the Guangdong province as well as the central authorities attach great importance to this matter. And in the very near future, we will be launching the matter so that the community can take part in the process and can build a consensus together. And so we, Macau and the 9 provinces and the central authorities will be of one mind in making this a success. Mr. Tong, if that's the case, Mr. Tong, then can the government start consulting the community on the concepts? Can you start consulting the various industries and trades so that they can plan in advance and so that they can make preparations before decisions are made? Sophie Leung, concerning the Pan-Pearl River Delta development, this is a major development project. It's going to have long-term implications on the economic development of Hong Kong. So we should be embracing such opportunities proactively, and we have to make sure that the community can play their part as early as possible. Recently, we have devoted a lot of our energy and attention on political development, and the government and Mr. Tsang have been focusing their attention on political development, and as a result, other things have been delayed. So I think we should really turn our attention to the economy, how we can identify new opportunities for growth, how we can bring about better economic development. So I'm glad that you have reminded us that we have to do this proactively. Mr. Lau Kong-Wah, yes, Mr. Chung has given a report to the central authorities, and we are told in the report that we in Hong Kong do not have enough political talents, but we all understand that political talents do not just fall from heaven. So I think we are talking about people who have taken part in elections and who occupy certain posts in the establishment. But now, for the CE and the principal officials, they do not have election experience. Yet they are responsible for governing Hong Kong. And then we have elected representatives of the people who do not have enough opportunities to govern Hong Kong. Do you think this is a satisfactory situation? And do you think the deadlock in Hong Kong, and in the remaining years of your term, what are you going to do to resolve this problem? Mr. Lau. At the inauguration ceremony, when I started my second term of office, I said that my mission was to promote economic development in Hong Kong. In 2002, the task was regarded as the most urgent one. And I also said that my second mission was to bring about improvements to governance. And I also said that I had to take forward political development. Perhaps you have forgotten what I have said, but I said those were my 3 priorities. Concerning economic development, I think we have been doing this steadily, but I hope that our focus will be on the economy. We should not move our focus to other areas. And then political development, now the process for change has been initiated. Of course, understand that some of you may not be too happy with the present state of affairs, but I hope that you will understand that for issues relating to political development, discussions are required and a consensus has to be built up. And I think we should join hands to take the issue of political development forward. And then thirdly, governance and the improvement of governance. I can tell you that I and all the principal officials regard this as a top priority. After the 1st of July last year, or since then, we have done a lot of reviews. We have been reminding ourselves that if we have inadequacies, we must try to make remedies. And I hope that you can all feel that improvements have already been made. But of course, we must continue to work hard and do an even better job. But in the process of governance improvement, and I think I really have to refer to the question raised by Mr. Tommy Cheung. What is most important is talents. And how can we nurture talents? Where do talents come from? I'm talking about political talents. Now, apart from LegCo and the district councils, do we have other nurturing grounds for political talents? Now, one nurturing ground will be our advisory and consultative mechanism or structure. We want to identify people who want to take part in public affairs to sit on the various advisory and statutory committees. They will be able to help us in those committees and councils. Can also be training grounds or nurturing grounds to give them more experience in public affairs. So this is something that we must do. So with regard to the nurturing of talents, these are the areas that we can work on, and we will be working on them very actively. And on the other hand, I hope that the business sector and the professionals can also do their part to nurture political talents to take part in politics.
Mr. Lau Kong-wah. Well, the chief executive has set his direction and he's put in great effort. I hope he'll be able to do that in the next few years. Now, to pick up on his response, you know, in your 7 years of experience in governing Hong Kong, now, you know, for the 3rd term candidate, how should he start organizing his ruling body? You know, in the original question, there is no mention of 3rd term, but chief executive, so it's up to you to answer this question. You know, for a sensitive question, I mean, where is appropriate, we'll answer it. It really depends on the situation. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Now, Mr. Tong, in answering Mr. Lau's question, said for political reform, there's a need to have discussion and consensus. I think the majority of the people in Hong Kong agree this should be done. But have you noted this, Mr. Tong? On 0708 universal suffrage, the NPCSC has given the death sentence. Now the people are enraged because before they announced the death sentence, the process, was a departure from the process most Hong Kong people have come to know. And before the NPCSC made the decision, it did not even attempt to adopt a rational and open attitude in consulting the people of Hong Kong. And it did not discuss the matter with the people of Hong Kong. And it was in less than a month that everything was rushed through and a decision was made. So now, in the past, in Hong Kong, we practice the rule of law. We have openness and transparency. Is it the case that this system has now been replaced by a rule by men and autocracy that's practiced on the mainland? Now, Hong Kong people are very unhappy, and I wonder if you have, come to appreciate that sort of sentiment. Now, people now have lost their confidence in the Hong Kong government and the central authorities. Do you know the reasons why? Is this because the system of consultation discussion has completely collapsed now? Now, I'm trying to follow the question to see what sort of question it is. The NPCSC has the responsibility and the power to make this decision. I have said repeatedly that I have read the speech made by the Secretary General Wu Bangguo. This decision was made by the NPCSC with the long-term interest of the people of Hong Kong in mind. They did so in a most responsible manner. I think for the NPCSC or Hong Kong, we must always make such decisions in the light of the long-term interest of Hong Kong. I know you are disappointed. I know there are others who are disappointed. And I can see for people who support the NPCSC's approach, and for people who now understand the approach of the NPCSC, well, they are growing in number. Because we can all see, in Hong Kong, there's been a lot of this debate on this issue in Hong Kong, and the community has become divided. Now the NPCSC has exercised its duties and powers. It's listened to many views, and then it's come to this decision. Now, so within the framework of the decision made by the NPCSC, we must now work together to reach a consensus for the 07 Chief Executive election and the 08 Legislative Council election. So let's hope that we can reach a consensus and then we can take forward our political development. Now, the basic law, I must stress that this is, the basic law has said this, and the central has said this. This is also our thinking. I think the ultimate goal is universal suffrage. And what we are debating now is whether it should be faster or in a steadier pace. That's all it is about. And I'm sure we're all working for the good of Hong Kong when we engage in this debate. I think what is the most important is that we have now taken the first step on this new basis. And so the second step is how we can move towards the ultimate goal. But if we do not take the first step and we just stand still, Mr. Leung Yu-chung, Mr. Tong kept saying that the mainland officials made this decision for the long-term interests of Hong Kong. So, Mr. Tong, the proposals or the comments made by the Democratic camp, is it as you have criticized that it's just for the sake of going against China and making chaos in Hong Kong is not for the long-term interest of Hong Kong. Now, if you agree we're also doing this for the long-term interest of Hong Kong, so that means we have consensus. So if we have consensus, how come every time you would not arrange to discuss with us before the MPCSC has made a decision? How come you have waited for MPCSC to make a decision and then you just inform us and then lecture us? Now, have you fought for the opportunities for us to express our views, or are you just indulging the many officials to keep just informing us and lecturing us? Actually, communication is very important. All along, we have tried to make possible more opportunities for communication. Well, you said I'm lecturing you. I'm not actually. Our views and perspectives. I think we really must understand more the views and perspectives of the mainland and the central authorities, and the primary consideration. The primary consideration is the same for all, is for the good of Hong Kong. But I think we need to understand their perspectives and viewpoints. Mr. James Tan. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Tong, I also want to ask about the negative rating given by Standard & Poor's. And in fact, recently our economy has improved substantially, and fiscal deficit has also been slimmed by tens of $billions, and unemployment has improved, and deflation has improved. So all these factors should lead to a higher rating for Hong Kong. But they said the main consideration is about possibility of unstable political environment. It's not about the 07-08 universal suffrage. I think it's as if the Democratic Party, the Democratic camp, is always against the government. But in our experience, it's not the case in this council. Panels and bills committees study bills, and we talk about issues of people's livelihood and so on. They are always willing to listen and work with the government. So before such credit rating agencies publish their reports, it's possible for the government to have more communication with them beforehand, like the financial secretary, for instance. Perhaps we could tell them that other than the fact that there are dissenting political views, but then on many other fronts, the Democratic camp also supports the government in their policies. Like CEPA or the individual visit scheme, the Democratic camp supports those as well. So I don't think we should give the impression to people overseas that things are in chaos in Hong Kong, especially when we are just starting to see the economy recover. Because if that's the impression they have overseas, it will have a negative impact on our employment, people's livelihood, and so on. Mr. Tian, I know Mr. Henry Tang is doing that. He's meeting the local representatives of these agencies. He's even gone to their head office to explain the situation to them. And you're right to point out that the fundamentals now are very good for Hong Kong. The figures are strong. Visitors number, visitor arrivals that could exceed 20 million, and that would be the new peak. And some 30 hotels are being built. They will be completed from now until 2007, and another 45 in the application process. They're waiting for approval. So these are all signs that the economy is turning for the better. So in tourism, in individual visit scheme, that's been very successful. Now I'm looking at Mrs. Miriam Lau now. Logistics also developing well. Last year, the container terminal growth has again put Hong Kong in the first place in the world. And actually we are first in 10 consecutive years. And aviation, air cargo, we are also one of the busiest airports in the world. So all these figures show that there is growth in many areas, and they're all doing very well. In financial sector, well, I've talked about that already. I'm not going to repeat myself. And last year we even had SARS, but even with SARS, there were 11% more foreign companies who came to Hong Kong to set up businesses or offices. some 500 companies more. And under CEPA this year, I'm sure the figure will go up even further. And then in terms of convention and exhibition, Hong Kong is Asia's #1. So you can see we're doing very well in many areas, and they have all helped to spur the economic growth. And of course, our country has also given us much support. So I think we need to go and do more explanation to the credit rating agencies. Of course, the fact is we are faced with a fiscal deficit problem, and that is one problem we must address. But we are confident that by 2008-2009 we'll be able to address the problem because the economy is improving now. So you're right. I think we must do more work in this area, and I hope you would all work to uphold the interest of Hong Kong and go out and tell people more about that. Mr. James Tan, thank you, Mr. Tong, for your comment. But my point is that I think we should tell overseas credit rating agencies more that in Hong Kong we are doing so is because we have the support of the democratic camp. So that is one message we must send out. We must not keep sending out a negative message that there is political bickering here. Yes, we'll do that. But James, if I could tell you this, you know, these credit rating agencies, they work in a different way. For example, they would be concerned about the macroeconomic adjustment on the mainland. But actually, if you look at measures rolled out under macroeconomic adjustment, that would do a lot of good, and I'm confident those measures would work, would succeed. But they don't care. They just think as long as there's macroeconomic adjustment, that will be a problem. And then it's similar in our case. They say, well, there is a fiscal deficit, and what about the democratic camp? You know, they look at these as facts. And that's how they look at things. That's how they work. But we'll try our best to explain the situation to them. Like, you know, some companies might lower the rating because interest rates might go up, but interest rates haven't gone up yet, but they don't know how much it will go up, and that's how they work. But we'll continue to do our part.
Mr. James Tong. Madam President, Mr. Tong, during the SARS outbreak, Mr. Tong was the commander-in-chief of the fight against SARS. So you are involved directly in many decisions made at that time. Now, LegCo is now holding an inquiry into the SARS outbreak. We want to find out the truth. So, have you taken the initiative to suggest that you should attend the Select Committee's hearing to reveal the truth to LegCo and to the public? Now, at the end of last month, Mr. Lam Woon Kwong gave a letter to the Select Committee, and he said that he would attend the hearing on your behalf because of constitutional considerations. Do you agree that it is not constitutional appropriate for you to attend a hearing? Is it that constitutionally you should only be accountable to the central authorities and you are not accountable to the people of Hong Kong or LegCo, which is elected by the people of Hong Kong? I fully respect and value the work of the Select Committee. I understand that many government officials have attended hearings and have provided evidence to the Select Committee. And Mr. Lam Woon Kwong attended the Select Committee's hearing on my behalf. From a constitutional point of view, Mr. James Tong, it is really not too appropriate for me to attend. But I know the Select Committee's thinking and its wishes. I understand that Mr. Lam and Dr. Law are discussing the matter, and we hope that an appropriate format can be arranged for me to talk to the Select Committee. Mr. Tong, can the C elaborate why is it that it is not constitutionally appropriate for you to attend the hearing? Is it that you can only be accountable to the central authorities and not to LegCo or the people of Hong Kong? No, it's just a view that it is constitutionally not too appropriate for me to attend the hearing. So we want to find an alternative way to achieve the same objective. Madam President, I asked Mr. Tong to elaborate as to what was meant by constitutionally inappropriate. So you wish the CE to supplement his answer. Yes, please be seated. Do you wish to supplement, Chief Executive? I do not have anything to add, and I can give you a report telling you why this is constitutionally inappropriate. In fact, we have written to LegCo on this matter. Chief Executive, is now 4 o'clock. 14 members have asked questions, and there are 11 members queuing up to ask questions. I'll answer questions from 3 more members. Mr. Chen Kam-lam. Madam President, Mr. Tong, last year, the astronaut from the mainland visited Hong Kong last year, and Hong Kong people have since then become more and more interested in space technology. I understand that the country is now selecting talents all over the country to take part in training. So if the country is to select talents here in Hong Kong for training, will you support such an initiative? This is definitely a good thing, right? This is definitely a good thing. So you have made a suggestion and I support it. Madam President, I have this dream. I don't know whether it's going to come true, but I think the assistance of Mr. Tong is needed. Now, if we have this suggestion, will Mr. Tong sign on the letter making such a demand? You have made this suggestion, and let's work hard together to achieve this goal. Mr. David Chu. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Tong, I believe you agree that one of the main problems in relation to political development in Hong Kong is the lack of mutual trust between Hong Kong and the central authorities. 7 years have lapsed since the reunification. This problem still exists. As the Chief Executive, do you think you are responsible for this problem? And as the Chief Executive, what are you going to do to really bring about an improvement to the situation? I did not call you, but you really have to be more careful because you're not too young. So you really have to be very careful. Take good care of yourself. Now, as I've said just now, concerning Hong Kong's economic development and political development, the role played by the mainland is critical. So we must build a very good and very harmonious relationship with the mainland, and the relationship should be based on mutual trust. And there is a lot of work to be done to build such a relationship. In fact, I can share the government's thinking with you on this. For example, if there is to be a harmonious relationship, then there must be mutual understanding, mutual respect, and mutual trust. Hong Kong people must fully understand the international scene, the role of the country, and the country's determination to maintain unity and territorial integrity, the challenges faced by the country in its development, and the importance of stability to the entire nation and to the entire country. And we have to look at the opportunities and also the obstacles in the way to stability and prosperity. And we also have to look at any possible impact on the well-being of our compatriots in the mainland. I think we should proactively and warmly show our concern for our compatriots in the mainland and for the development in the mainland. And that will definitely help to enhance the relationship between the central authorities and the SAR. And I think these thoughts should merit our consideration. And also, if we are to build a harmonious relationship, then there have to be a few components or elements. Now, I've just outlined some, and we have to accept and respect the policy of one country, two systems, and we have to understand the limits imposed by the central authorities on our powers. So we are given a lot of powers and freedoms, but then there are also restrictions and conditions. So we have to accept both. We have to understand both. So I think these will help to build mutual trust. And I hope that communication can be stepped up. There should be more visits and there should be more opportunities for communication. Mr. David Chu, do you wish to follow up?
Well, I want to clarify that before I asked this question, I did not inform anyone in advance. And you know about parachuting, it's a soft landing. And I hope that for political reform in Hong Kong, there will also be a soft landing. Thank you. Last question. Sorry, your Cantonese is still not too good. Mr. Wang Yonggan. Thank you, Mr. President, Madam President. I want to ask the question of great concern to my industry. Since January, the bird flu broke out, you know, in Hong Kong, many places around the world. There was great concern about bird flu. So my question for the government is, now on the mainland, we have resumed normal supply, but with limited number, and so prices could not really come down. And some members of this council thought that farmers just put up the prices, but actually it's because there is a shortage of supply, that's why. So could you consider talking to the mainland to resume normal supply so that people in Hong Kong don't have to pay too much for this? Now, on the 21st of March, together with the agriculture and fisheries sector, we went to Beijing. The mainland told us that whatever you have, you know, in terms of request about the agriculture and fisheries, the central authorities will support it. But the most important thing is whether there is a long-term policy on agriculture and fisheries in Hong Kong, so that the farmers in this field could survive. So could you lay down such a policy so that these sectors could survive in Hong Kong? In Asia and other places this year, there was an outbreak of avian flu and SARS. That's a wake-up call to us once again. I'm glad that our colleagues in the government in handling SARS and avian flu, they've learned from their past experience and they've handled the matter really well. And in fact, we do need to have an agricultural policy. And for the import of chickens from mainland, yes, we do need to have a long-term policy too. Now, so what are the considerations in formulating this policy? One, the safety and health of the public, that's the first and foremost consideration. And on that basis, we can then lay down policies. I understand Dr. E.K. Yao is working very hard on that. He's trying to see what long-term policies could be rolled out, and I'm sure he will then explain those to you. I understand we also have some medium-term thinking. We are, in fact, in discussion with the sector on this. Mr. Wang Yongkan? I'm glad to hear from the Chief Executive that there will be a policy, but when will this policy be implemented? Do you have a timetable, please? I think I'll have to ask Dr. Yao to give you an answer. Thank you. Thank you, Chief Executive. You've answered questions from 17 members, and this is the third question and answer session within this LegCo session, and there will be one more question and answer session within this term of LegCo. Please, members, please rise. The Chief Executive will leave the chamber now. I now adjourn the Council until 2:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 12th of May, 2004.